shared.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And hello, everybody. My name is Sherry Takamoto. I am the chair of the Arlington County Developmental Disabilities Subcommittee of the Arlington CSB. We're delighted to have our very first ever virtual Listen and Learn event on the Medicaid waivers supports for children and adults with developmental disabilities. Tom, if you're not recording this yet, you can go ahead and start recording now.
It is being recorded.
Okay, thank you. And this is in collaboration with the Arlington's Developmental Disabilities Services Program that runs developmental services for youth and adult in Arlington County as part of the Department of Human Services. The Arlington Public School Special Education Parent Resource Center that we call the PRC, and of course, the ARC of Northern Virginia. To begin, I'm going to ask Emma from the Parent Resource Center to introduce herself in Spanish in case there are folks who are more familiar with Spanish.
Sí, buenas tardes y gracias por acompañarnos esta noche. Y mi nombre es Emma y trabajo en el Centro de Recursos para Padres de Familia. Hablo español, como ven. Si tienen alguna pregunta, si por favor no la pueden poner en la cajita de chat en español, yo voy a estar aquí. Muchas gracias. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And Emma's here if anyone speaks Spanish and they'd like to have questions in the chat. So today's agenda is going to be just the welcome that you have here, the basics of the Medicaid waiver. For those of you who know about the Medicaid waiver, it is super duper complicated. And so to begin with, Lucy Beadnell from the ARC of Northern Virginia is going to give us the basics. She's going to cover both the DD Medicaid waiver that is managed by the Community Services Board Developmental Services Division that LaVoice runs, and also something called the CCC Plus waiver. Please don't ask me what CCC Plus stands for because I don't know, but Lucy will let us know. And then that will be followed by a little deeper explanation of services in the developmental services world at the Arlington CSB. And then we're delighted to have a panel presentation. We wanted to have folks who were knowledgeable about the 3 types of DD Medicaid waivers. And we are really fortunate because all 3 experts are people who are currently receiving those waivers. That will be followed by questions and answers. And a little bit about the ground rules for that. For today's meeting, unlike our regular developmental disabilities meetings, everyone will be on mute except for the folks who are presenting. The chat is wide open if anyone wants to communicate via the chat. And during the questions and answers, I will read the questions and answers only beginning after the panel presentation ends. So here's those rules, okay? My name is Sherry Takamoto. I am the chair of the Developmental Disabilities Committee of the Arlington Community Services Board. The presenters are Lucy Beadnell, who's the Director of Advocacy at the ARC of Northern Virginia, and LaVoice Reed, the Bureau Director for the Arlington Department of Human Services, or DHS, Clinical and Developmental Services, which is housed in the Aging and Disability Services Division. But most of all, you can just call her LaVoice, like we all do. A little bit about our Developmental Disabilities Committee. We are a citizens advisory committee advocating for services so adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities can enjoy successful and satisfying lives. We meet the second Tuesday of the month from 4 to 6. If you would like to stay up to date on, it's a way that I joined originally to stay up to date on current and proposed services and programs provided by DD Services in Arlington County. But the advisory folks help the CSB understand how services and programs meet or don't meet the needs and wants of Arlingtons with disabilities and their families. We are here to promote equity, and the Community Services Board is committed to creating equitable access to the resources and opportunities needed for every community member to be healthy, safe, and economically secure. We welcome dialogue on the experiences, ideas, issues, and desires of the Black, Indigenous, people of color community and want to learn from citizens that we aren't hearing from. I've inherited, I'm new chair, and I've inherited a email list from Carol Skelly, who's the former chair of this committee. And you can join that list either by putting your email address in the chat that we will capture after this meeting, or you can email me at sherryt@ecnb.org. So at that, we're going to start with Lucy B. Now from the ARC of Northern Virginia. Thank you, Lucy.
I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks, Sherry. As Sherry said, Medicaid waivers are very complicated. And usually when I give a presentation on waivers, I ask for at least an hour, and we're going to do this in about 20 minutes. So for perspective, I would say walking away with a sense of, I understand what a waiver is, at least kind of. I understand whether or not it's something we would want, and I understand where to go next. If that's to apply, if that's to ask more questions, whatever that is, I would say those are good goals for today. And we're happy to share lots of resources for other ways to learn. So Sherry, if you can move me ahead, we'll talk a little bit about what we plan to discuss today. We'll talk a little bit about like what waivers are, why do they exist? What does that term waiver mean anyway? Then we'll talk about how you know if you're eligible for this program. Then we'll talk about the services that the waivers offer, a bit about how to apply. And because there is a waiting list with some waivers, we'll have a whole separate conversation on navigating that waiting list because it's not a straightforward kind of number of years to wait sort of answer. And then my contact information is at the end. So in addition to us sharing information about other ways to learn about waivers, you're welcome to follow up with me directly anytime. So we'll go on ahead to the purpose and description of Medicaid waivers. And Sherry, I'm seeing myself on the screen, but not the slides. Okay, so can we jump ahead here? All right, and one more. Okay, so Medicaid waivers are so important because they're meant to be essentially a one-stop shop for services. So if you say that you've got low needs or relatively high needs, if you say you want to live at home or with friends or with people you don't know, if you say you need employment supports or day supports, if you're young, if you're aging in place, all of these folks, if they have a developmental disability, services are usually offered through the Medicaid waiver. And that services across the lifetime once someone receives a waiver. So there's no age minimum or maximum. They're so valuable because they're the only public, meaning free or low cost, way to pay for ongoing support services. There are a few other programs that can provide some intermittent help, but if we're really talking about someone who's going to need help over the long term, at home, at work, in the community, etc., waivers are the place to be. Now we'll talk a little bit about types of waivers. Sherry, can you move us ahead? Okay, so we'll go on. And as Sherry mentioned, I'm going to talk about two types of waivers, and I'll explain why in just a second. But first, let's look at the left-hand side of our screen, and we'll talk about the DD waivers, so called because they require a developmental disability diagnosis. And they've got a big menu of services for living at home, for nursing care if you need medical supports, for working or daytime care, for supports out in the community. It can pay for up to 24/7 awake staff and supports or remote monitoring if you need it. It comes with case management, someone to help you figure out what does this waiver offer, how do I use it, what is there beyond the waiver, how do I come up with a plan, etc. So in many ways, it's a great service, but it does have a significant waiting list. We'll talk about navigating that waiting list and what it looks like toward the end of this presentation, but because that waiver though it really has a lot of services, has a waiting list, I often mention it along with another waiver, the CCC Plus, or Commonwealth, like Commonwealth of Virginia, Coordinated Care Plus waiver. That waiver requires some kind of disability diagnosis, which could be a developmental disability. It requires also a medical need, though. So for perspective, at any given time when we've pulled the numbers, about a quarter to a third of people on that waiting list for the DD waiver also have a medical need and are able to access the CCC Plus waiver. So it's not for everybody, but it's a really significant minority of our population. That CCC Plus waiver is aimed at keeping people out of nursing homes, though there's not an age minimum. And I say that to explain it's got a much shorter menu of services. Some home care, some nursing and respite, but not employment and residential services. There's a 56-hour-a-week cap, so 8 hours a day, on personal care. It doesn't come with a case manager, but there's no waiting list. So if you're hearing this and you're thinking, actually, we deal with a lot of medical stuff, I would be thinking, possibly pursuing both of these waivers makes sense for me. If you're hearing, oh, in our family, we really don't have very much medical stuff going on. Maybe we take a pill, maybe we see doctors on a semi-regular basis, but nothing very intense, then probably the DD waiver is going to be where you're focused. But next I'll talk through eligibility so you know for sure, or at least have a much clearer idea. And I'll go back and forth between how you know if you're eligible for the DD waiver and the CCC Plus. So Sherry, let's move on ahead here. Okay, we can keep on going. So eligibility is based on three things: someone's diagnosis, what's called functional criteria, how much help do they need, is what that means. And third is financial criteria, is the person with a disability only, not their whole family, not their parents, is the person with a disability financially eligible for Medicaid. So now let's look at these one by one and kind of compare our waivers. So first, for diagnosis, the DD waivers unsurprisingly require a DD diagnosis. This slide is so wordy, and I promise you never have to read it. But it essentially is saying before age 22, before the end of that brain, the frontal lobe development and that developmental period ending, we saw a mental impairment, a physical impairment, or both, that are significantly impacting this person. Part 4 here talks about the life areas in which they're impacted: taking care of themselves, communicating, learning. So things like assessments that you get from school sometimes meet the criteria here, but we're really looking for is a diagnostician who gives a diagnosis, for example, autism, and an IQ score. There's no IQ minimum or maximum, but those two pieces together are usually what's looked for. And then we're looking at the demonstration in that assessment of these kinds of needs that we see on the screen here. That assessment is showing, yes, here's the diagnosis. Yes, I've given you an IQ score, and I can tell you what these person's adaptive needs are, what their support needs are. If we're looking at a little one who's under age 9, sometimes we don't need something quite so comprehensive. So it's a great idea to reach out to your community services board, and we'll talk about them later. If you want to apply for this waiver with documentation you have from the PI program or Child Find or whatnot, I say all this to say, like, don't get bogged down and panicked that you feel like you don't have the exact right kind of evaluation. LaVoice and her team are great about looking at those for people. And I certainly don't want anyone to slow down applying for the waiver because they're worried they don't have the right paperwork. Let's look at it before we do that. Okay, but the general idea is we want an IQ and a diagnosis. Okay. So let's go to the next slide here, and we'll look at what kind of diagnoses are we looking for the CCC Plus waiver. And it's a little grayer, if you will, than for the DD waiver. We need some kind of disability diagnosis. Like I said, it can be a developmental disability, but also significant medical needs. Right there in the middle of the screen is a hyperlink to a organization that's a private provider in the waiver world, by which I mean this is nothing official, but they have put out the only free self-assessment tool I've ever seen for the CCC Plus waiver. And as a person with a disability or a parent, you will be able to answer the questions that they're asking. And it's right on their website, and it doesn't look like it doesn't need your contact information or anything. You would just answer those questions to get a sense of, do our medical needs likely qualify us or not? And we're not talking about diagnosis here, to be clear. We're talking about some kind of disability plus medical support need. What does that mean? So for example, if you told me someone had a seizure disorder, I would say that may qualify them. Do we have a seizure protocol in place? Do we see the neurologist a couple times a year? Does everyone who work with them understand their seizure protocol, how to monitor for absent seizures, right? Are we actively working on this? We're taking meds, we're seeing a doctor, we're assessing, we're providing care on a regular basis. But if you said, you know, they had a seizure when they were 4, they're 35 now, we don't even see the neurologist anymore, then I would say that's probably not going to work, right? It's not that the person has a seizure disorder, it's how much support do we need related to it. And so with any kind of medical support needs, right? Does this person have significant nutritional support needs or a G-tube or wound care or all kinds of other things? And do they need a lot of help taking care of it, is what these questions are really aimed at asking. So hopefully now we have a little bit of a sense of DD waiver, we need a DD diagnosis. CCC plus waiver, we'd need some disability diagnosis and some medical needs. So now let's go on and look at how you would know if you're functionally eligible, if you've got enough support needs to qualify for this waiver. And it's done in different ways depending upon the waiver you're applying for. So the DD waivers do that with a tool called the VIDES, and that's spelled out there on the screen in orange. The Virginia Individual Developmental Disabilities Eligibility Survey, which is actually a very descriptive title, but a mouthful to say, so you can understand why it's often called the VIDES. And there's a version of the VIDES for little ones from the day they're born until the day they turn 3, from 3rd birthday till the day before they turn 18, and for adults. In short, we're trying to compare with relatively similar developmental peers. And we're looking at how is this person getting help or needing help to take care of their medical needs, learning, communication, getting about, money management, behavior, etc. And on that VIDES assessment, which you can get to at the ARC of Northern Virginia's website, and it's a public document, I always encourage folks, look at it ahead of time, because if you're going to be talking about personal things, it's great to be prepared. It'll tell you right on the front, we're asking about these 8 life areas, these categories on the screen. We need you to show that in at least 3 of those 8 areas, you have significant needs. And it'll tell you in this section, for example, the behavior section, we're looking to see that these things happen regularly. It'll define regularly. It'll tell you how many points. So you can work through it. To do the VIDES in person usually takes people like 30 to 45 minutes. It can be longer or shorter. I would say to do it at home as a parent, you can probably run through it pretty fast. You'll know the answers to those questions, but it's a great way to prepare. And I would say, again, because you're going to be talking about very personal things, behaviors, restroom habits, the person with a disability is going to meet with the person who's giving this VIDES. So we want them to know what's going on, for them to be prepared for these questions. And this is a time to really stress the need and the actual help and support that person has to have, not a time to say, oh, on their very best days, they're just doing super duper. Because as a parent, that's our instinct, and that is a good instinct. It is just not a great way to show that you're eligible for programs that you need help with. So be thinking about, like, really, truly, what does this person need, and how are we prepared to give those answers? And if you have questions about the VIDES, I'm sure the CSB is happy to help. I'm happy to help too. You know, if you read it and you say, I don't know what this means, just shoot me a message. For the CCC Plus waiver, assessment is done with a different tool. It's called the Uniform Assessment Instrument. There's a hyperlink to it there. It's a big focus on hands-on care for things like bathing, dressing, and using the restroom for sure, and medical needs. I think it's kind of repetitive, meaning you'll answer a lot of questions about bathing, dressing, using the restroom, medical needs. But unlike the VIDES, there's no scoring guide. So you can't just go back to the front page and transfer your answers and see if you're eligible or not. But anytime, my theory is anytime a teacher's going to give you the questions to a quiz beforehand, look at those questions, right? So it's a great idea to know the kinds of things that they're going to be asking about and assessing whether or not someone's eligible so that you're prepared. Okay, we'll go on here and we'll talk about financial eligibility. And this is the same essentially for both waivers. And this is only for the person with a disability. So if that person is a tiny babe or a teenager or an adult, if they're working, living at home, I'm trying to cover a lot of bases here. You get it. Only the person with a disability in all circumstances. We're looking at what is their monthly income. In 2023 dollars, it would have to be less than $2,742 a month. That number increases with inflation each year because inflation is pegged to the Social Security benefit amount, SSI, and that's what it's based upon. So if the person with a disability is earning less on their own than $2,442 a month, they should be financially eligible in terms of income. They may have a copay for waiver services, though, if they're a relatively high income earner for waiver. So if they're earning roughly more than $1,400-ish a month, they may have a copay to buy into their waiver services, just like you would with private insurance. For adults who are using waiver, in addition to having an income limit, there's an asset limit. So all of, like, if we added together a checking account and savings account and all those kinds of things, we would make sure that that's less than $2,000 to be eligible. Otherwise, you can put that money in something like a special needs trust or an ABLE account that still makes the person eligible. That's the whole purpose of those kinds of special accounts, that someone continues to be eligible for public benefits. If the person is a child, then we're not so much worried about assets in their name because they're a child, but that'll come into play when they're 18. So I know that's like so many words to talk about financial eligibility, but so help me when I try and shorten it, someone asks a particular question and I don't want to leave you hanging. So what we're looking for is, no matter the age of the person with a disability, income under $2,742 a month. For adults, resources either in a special needs trust or an ABLE account if they've got more than $2,000. For kiddos, I would say it's probably better to have a discussion, but generally speaking, assets like a checking account aren't going to stand in their way, or a savings account. Okay, so after all of this talk, now let's move on to talk about services, which I'll say, of course, bear in mind, the services you get are going to vary based upon what you need and an individual plan that you sit down and write. But I'm going to talk kind of generally about the services that the waivers offer, so you can have a sense of why on earth are we sitting through this long presentation to learn about this program. Okay, so Sherry will go on to the next slide. And again, I'll start with DD waivers and then move to CCC+. So for the DD waivers, there are 3 types of DD waiver, right? Like, just when you think you're getting the hang of it, I'm throwing you this curveball, but hang with me. So there are 3 types of DD waiver. One's called the community living waiver. It's aimed at people with the most significant support needs. It can offer 24/7 awake staff in a residential setting. The next waiver is the family and individual supports waiver. And I would say this is a good waiver for the large majority of our population who, at least some part of the day or night, they don't need someone awake and touching them or looking at them, right? This is someone who maybe we can have remote supports. The person could just push a button and get help overnight, or someone who needs supports there the whole time they're awake, but overnight they're mostly okay and they know who to call, right? We can kind of get this idea wrapped around our head. So think less, generally speaking, than 24/7 supports, but it certainly can come with residential options. It's called supported living, where the person with a disability lives with 1 or 2 housemates and they've got staff brought in. Can be a very, very, very large amount of the day. And then there's the building independence waiver. And this is a waiver for people who are over 18, pretty independent, by which I mean need no more than on average like a handful of hours of someone supporting them in their home a day, and otherwise are living away from parents, can be okay and safe in their own home. I don't mean without remote monitoring or people to call, but I mean someone who we could say, hey, I'm going to the store, and we could know they're going to be safe there. Right? Or someone who can maybe get themselves up in the morning, or maybe handle evening making dinner, little pockets of time that they can be alone. So all of the waivers DD waivers offer some kind of residential support, but it may not be 24/7. It's based upon need. All of the waivers offer the same relatively large menu of day and employment services. So is the person going to go volunteer 1 day a week, get paid employment in a workplace 1 day a week? Are they going to learn new skills another day a week? Or are they going to do the same thing all 5 days? You can mix and match here with your waiver, right? All 3 of the DD waivers allow you to kind of choose your own adventure, if you will, with day and employment services that, of course, you can change over time. Maybe we have someone who's graduated from school and we have a lot more daytime support options, but as that person continues to grow and develop skills, we move more toward employment or more hours of employment, especially if we find a great employer. All 3 of the DD waivers offer support in your home, by which I mean the home of the person with a disability. So that can be a lot of hours of support. It can be a few hours of support based upon the person's needs. It can be a companion who's there to make sure you're safe, help you kind of navigate things, or it can be personal care, someone who's helping you make dinner, get dressed, those kinds of things. It should be relatively individualized there. All of those DD waivers can offer respite care. If you've got regularly scheduled hours of care each week, there can be weeks when we need more. Parents are out of town. We're homesick. It's spring break from school, whatever it is. Respite's just in a little extra pool of hours to pull in some additional care. All of the waivers, if you need them, can come with nursing care. And all three of the DD waivers come with environmental modifications to change your house to adapt it, assistive technology like portable technology, and EHBS, which is an acronym that I couldn't fit on the slide for electronic home-based services. Think like smart homes, remote monitoring, stoves that shut themselves off. I can push a button and talk to someone to get help even if they're not in my unit, that kind of thing. In comparison, the CCC Plus waiver offers at a max 56 hours a week, like we talked about earlier, of that kind of one-to-one personal care. You can get nursing, you can get some respite, you can get a change to your house or car and some of that portable technology, but note much smaller menu of services. Again, no employment and residential services. So a lot of folks who use the CCC Plus waiver as children come to find that as they get older, the DD waiver is more important. So now we'll go on to how to apply for both these waivers. And again, we'll move back and forth from DD waiver to CCC Plus. So Sherry, if you can flip us ahead one. So Arlington County Community Services Board handles all the folks who are applying for a DD waiver in Arlington County. You'll give them a buzz. You'll say, Sherry hosted this amazing presentation and I heard about these waivers and I can't wait to get one. And they will send you some paperwork to fill out and you'll make sure you've got that psych evaluation handy with the IQ and diagnosis that we talked about. They'll sit with you to do that VIDES that we discussed that you've already practiced on, where you talk about your support needs. You'll get a letter saying you're on the waiting list, and then we'll talk about where on the waiting list you are. And Sherry, can you flip us to that section too? Oh, in fact, I'll come back to it. No, that's my fault. So then let's talk about CCC Plus waiver. So if you're applying for the CCC Plus waiver, you're calling the Department of Social Services and saying, I've heard great things about the CCC Plus waiver. We think we could be eligible. I'd say be prepared to answer a good number of questions about, you guessed it, bathing, dressing, using the restroom, and medical care on the phone. This is the theme for this waiver, right? If on the phone they think, yeah, it seems like you likely have the relevant needs, they'll send out a nurse who asks very similar questions in person, and then they'll go ahead and get you hooked up with a care worker and folks to start services. Because remember, for this waiver, there is no waiting list. Okay. So let's go back to, for our DD waivers, if we do have to navigate a waiting list, what does that look like? If you're put on the waiting list, you're put in one of three categories. 1, 2, or 3, appropriately named. The state agency that manages waivers put these timelines with them that I'm not a big fan of because I would not say they're a great predictor of the wait for services. But I will say priority 1 is who we think about. We're in some kind of urgent need of waiver services. The person with the disabilities needs aren't being met. We're having issues with parents or caregivers being able to support them, those kinds of things. Like we're already in a place where things are not going well. Priority 2 is what I usually think about. We're doing okay. It would really be helpful to have a waiver for these reasons, but mostly we're managing. And priority 3, I would describe as usually folks are doing well, younger, healthier, getting a lot of services through school, private pay, private insurance, or parents are great supporters and caregivers. Maybe the person has a CCC Plus waiver that is meeting most of their needs. For example, those are sometimes folks who are on priority 3. And you'll move between these priority tiers at any time based upon your needs. So you can always call up the Community Services Board and say, you know what? We were a priority 2, but we've got a new disability diagnosis in our household and we're having a lot of trouble managing those needs. I think we may need to talk about moving up to priority 1. And the CSB at any time should be able to tell you where you are. So the next slide, I'll warn you, is very wordy. Like just know that it's coming, but we will walk through it together. Okay, so I mentioned that there are 3 DD waivers. Community living, people with 24/7 needs, family and individual support, less than 24/7 needs, more than drop in here and there, and building independence, adults with roughly drop in here and there kind of needs. They share a waiting list, generally speaking. If you were over 18, had relatively few needs, and were ready to move, you can probably go ahead and get a building independence waiver right away. As you can imagine, because that serves a smaller part of our population, there's less demand for it. But for the majority of folks who are waiting for waivers, waiting list time is unpredictable because it's based upon urgency of need, right? You can be in priority 1 for many years without rising to the top and getting a waiver when waivers are offered. What will put you in that priority 1 category? Things like the parent has their own disability or mental health need that makes it hard to provide the care that you need. The person has needs that aren't being met. Maybe we have really challenging behaviors or really complex medical needs, and no matter how we try and bandage things together, it's not working. The person is not as safe and successful as we want them to be. Or the person is aging out of school, like last year's school time frame, and before their 27th birthday, and really ready for those services. So that kind of brief window of time are the usual reasons we see someone on there. And when someone is on that priority 1 waiting list, they can be reviewed for a new waiver, they can be offered waivers, and there's a slot assignment committee that's make recommendations that are kind of like matchmaking. So they would say, based upon what you've said you need from the waiver, here's a waiver that's available that we think will fit your needs. Right? So that's kind of the idea there. So you aren't choosing the waiver and you aren't waiting for a specific waiver. It's a bit of a matchmaking process based upon needs at any given time. Now that I have everyone thoroughly confused, I will put my contact information on the screen. Really, truly, you can ask anything. I think Sherry will share this, but next week I am giving Monday or Tuesday, like a 1-hour version of this same discussion where we'll talk about waivers in depth. We have lots of recorded versions of this, handout equivalents of this, 3-minute versions of parts of this, all those kinds of things at the Arc of Northern Virginia that folks can avail themselves to. So by all means, you can ask me anything, anytime. And there's also other things out there. And I know now LaVoice wanted to kind of fill in all the balls that I dropped or fill in all the holes that I left, I suppose. So I will turn things over to her.
No, not any holes. You did an excellent job overviewing the waivers, which, as we have all noted, is they're very complicated and complex to understand. So thank you so much, Lucy, for that. A couple of things that I do want to just touch on and to clarify specifically where Arlington County is concerned. And we don't do anything different, from the state. In terms of the state requirements, because they're the same across all 40 community services boards, the same. But for going back to the diagnostic determination of how we look at that here in Arlington County, and particularly this has implications for use of local funded for services as well. So the diagnoses, you do need to have a diagnosis for developmental disability as noted, and the level of functioning. We actually look at the material that is submitted for the level of functioning. So that could be the psychological evaluation, it can be a school IEP, it can be information that you receive from the medical community, a doctor, to look at level of functioning in those particular areas. We look specifically at the VIDEs for the sole purpose of adding someone to the DD Medicaid waiver wait list. It does not factor into determining the diagnoses, however, for us. So again, to be added to the waiver wait list, you have to have a developmental disability according to the Code of Virginia. And you have to meet on the VIDE. So the VIDE is definitely done to determine adding someone to the wait list, but it is not an instrument that we use in determining developmental disability. So just adding some clarification for that, but it is something that we do. It has to be done by a support coordinator, and we do it as part of determining being added eligibility for the wait list. In Arlington County, that's important because unlike most, if not all other localities in the state, we actually do provide public funding and resources. So the waiver is not the only public resource for services here in Arlington County. So if someone is determined to have a developmental disability, again, according to the Code of Virginia definition that Lucy shared with you, and they do not meet on the VIDEs, we will actually still be able to support that individual with local funded services for day support and for employment services. But employment services, you do still need to go through DARS. So rest assured, even if you don't meet currently on the VIDES in applying for services in Arlington, there are other resources by which you can receive funding for services. Another thing that I did want to mention too is where the financial eligibility is concerned. It is accurate. You do definitely need to meet the Medicaid criteria for being eligible for Medicaid. However, at the time that you were added to the wait list, you do not need to meet that financial eligibility. So someone could, for example, be over-resourced. They may have, a significant amount of money in savings, for example, that you could put into an ABLE account, you could put into a special needs trust, but I don't want you to feel like you have to go and do that immediately when you're first added to the wait list. By the time you actually are assigned a waiver, part of the process is to submit an application if you don't already have Medicaid, is to work with you on submitting an application for Medicaid. And it's at that time that if you have to spend down or you are over-resourced and you need to put funds into an ABLE account, that we would work with you on doing that. You certainly can do that a lot sooner, but you don't have to have that done at the time that you were actually added to the wait list. And then let's see. Lastly, I definitely want to echo updates for the priority screening. So when you are added to the wait list and your VIDES is done, we're telling you that you're found eligible. We're going to do that priority screening, looking at the priority 1, 2, and 3. But it is important that you are communicating to the support coordinator. You'll be informed in a letter that you would receive who your support coordinator is, and we're looking to update that letter annually, biannually, to remind you who the support coordinator is and to reach out to us to let us know if something has changed about your situation, because that's what helps in terms of reevaluating you. So you may be a priority 3 and things have changed and shifted to where we need to reassess and reevaluate if the individual needs to be changed to a priority 2 or a priority 1, or vice versa. Maybe something has changed and you no longer are priority 1 and needs to shift down to a priority 2 or 3. But we don't have a crystal ball to know what is going on with the individual and the family. So it's really important to have that communication and reaching out to let us know that as well. So Sherry, those are the highlights that I wanted to just sort of touch on. And like Lucy, I am certainly available for questions, as I imagine there will be many following our wonderful panel that we pulled together. So I will turn it over to you to introduce the panel.
Thank you. And I'll share my screen in a second, but I'm a little bit technologically backwards. And so, Lucy, I'm going to ask you to begin the introductions, starting with Lisa, and I'll turn around and try to get Pete on screen right now.
That sounds like a plan to me. So we've got 3 panelists with us today. First is Lisa Marie Hughes, and she's married to David Hughes. She is a sparkly, brand new, fresh 59 years old and works at Arlington Weaves, etc., where she makes bags and other items. She is a highly accomplished athlete with Special Olympics track and field, basketball, and soccer. She loves cats and dogs, singing karaoke, baking, learning new recipes, and painting. Lisa receives the Community Living Waiver, and as a quick reminder, that's the waiver I talked about where you can get up to 24/7 active supports if you need them, and has for many years. And then I know Sherry's working to get some other folks on screen here. I'll go ahead and talk about Pete next, who I know is going to be joining us. Pete lives in his own apartment in Ballston with Chris, who's been his best friend since he was in 7th grade. He attended the Career Center in Arlington after graduating from Yorktown High School and the Life program at George Mason University. Pete has worked as a courtesy clerk at Safeway for 18 years and now has a job at the assisted living facility nearby where his grandma lives. He's the engagement coordinator there. I have to say they're very lucky to have him. And he works on exercises and games. And Pete uses the building independence waiver. And again, as a reminder, that's the waiver I discussed for people over 18 who are living away from parents and need relatively few hours of direct support each day. And lastly, Juan Yong is going to be joining us. He's a 25-year-old non-speaking autistic who spells to communicate on either a letterboard or a keyboard. He has surpassed expectations, having earned his high school diploma online and an associate's degree at Northern Virginia Community College, where he majored in English. He would like to be a writer one day. Juan is currently receiving the family and individual supports waiver. And again, as a reminder, that's what I'll describe as the middle tier waiver. You're not super independent. We don't need 24/7. He currently lives in an apartment with a roommate at Gilliam Place, which is our stomping ground property, a great kind of collaborative service and support provider here. He enjoys the safety and community life that property offers. And every day he participates in activities with his friends and neighbors, like hour-long walks, environmental club meetings, a social justice club, and a book group. So as you can see, we have kind of quite the brain trust here. And I will ask some questions of our panelists, Sherry, once you let me know it's a good time to get everyone up on screen here. And we'll do it in a pretty casual format so that as I ask a question, every panelist who wants to answer it can. And if they don't, we'll just keep right on rolling. So Sherry, you let me know when you're ready for us to do questions. And if folks are able to turn on cameras on our panel, that would be great. So Lisa, Juan, and Pete, we'd love to see your beautiful faces. Okay, Sherry's camera and microphone is off, and I know she's with Pete. So we'll give another minute here. Lisa,
okay, so Lisa and Juan, are you able to come on screen?
They're all on screen.
So maybe it's the view that I have where I'm not seeing them somehow.
Yeah, I can see all three of them on screen.
Lisa, once they're talking, what happened, the voice was I pinned you, so that's the problem.
Okay.
Stop spotlighting. Stop spotlighting.
There's everybody. Yay. Hi, Pete, Juan, and Lisa.
Hi.
Hi, I'm so excited y'all are here.
Yeah.
Well, we will go ahead and get going. And I will ask a question and we can just take turns going around. So the first thing I'll ask is, how long have you had the Medicaid waiver? Lisa, go ahead.
15 plus years.
15 plus years? So you're a veteran here. Pete, how about you?
3, 4, 5 years.
Say it.
5 years.
5 years, after a long wait, as I recall. And Juan, did you want to talk about how long you've had your DD waiver?
Juan, you're going to have to turn your mic on.
Here we are. Thanks, Juan. I see your mic's off now. And as a reminder, Juan uses a letterboard or typing to communicate. Can you tell us how many years you've had your waiver, if you remember?
Yes, we're going to play. Let's see if it works.
Perfect. Thanks.
Did you hear?
We can't hear it somehow
okay.
on our end.
Sorry.
Or at least I can't.
It
By way of background, Lisa provided all the questions in advance, and Juan produced all his answers. And so if his answers cannot be played out loud, then maybe his communication assistant can read them. I'll leave it up to the two of you.
Yes, I can read his answers. He says, I believe I've had the waiver for 15 years. I started the DD waiver in 2008. Now it is the Family and Individual Support Medicaid waiver.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer. And as a reminder, in 2008, the waiting list for that program looked very different, and you all were very clever early adopters to have gotten a waiver then. Kudos to you. Okay. So the next question has kind of two parts to it. It's where do you live and who helps you there? Who would like to go? Lisa.
I live at the Gilliam with staff support, and I really like to do dinner, baking, going out in the community with the staff, and hanging out with Donna and her daughter Emma.
Lisa, can I ask you a follow-up question to that? Have you always lived in those apartments, or are there different places you've lived?
Different places.
Okay. Can you remind me of some of the types of places you lived before?
I live in group homes, which I didn't like. Northern Virginia Training Center, I didn't like. That's all I can think of. And
Those are great answers. And you've lived in different apartments too, is that right?
yes.
So Lisa's such a great panelist today because she really has tried a range of residential support models. And if people aren't familiar, the Northern Virginia Training Center was the very old style institution for people with disabilities that also provided some crisis supports that's no longer there. And as Lisa said, that was not a good fit for her, and a group home wasn't a good fit for her, but this model of an apartment with staff is. Pete or Juan, who would like to go next and tell us about where you live and who helps you out there?
One can go. I live in an apartment with a roommate at Gilliam Place. I have attendants coming every day. On days that I go to work, the attendant would help me prepare lunch and take me to work. The attendant also picks me up from work in the afternoon. They help me prepare dinner. Service Source also supports me at work. On days that I don't work, the attendant coordinates walks with my friends from the apartment building, daily activities, and so on.
That's an awesome answer and gives such a good picture of how different waiver services can be partners, right? Sometimes I have an aide, sometimes I have supports at work, sometimes I could even have live-in staff to partner with all of that. That's awesome. Pete, can you tell us about where you live and who helps you out there?
I live at Boston, where we used to do a metro state, old metro yard, and now it's luxury apartments. I live with my friend from 7th grade, and I also have an aide who comes in and helps me. Because best friends don't listen to each other, that's why I have an aide, another aide.
Fantastic. So Pete, I know that you love your apartment, which is gorgeous. And that's another great example of how we could have someone like Pete who has a live-in aide, someone who's there 24/7, but we parents know, even though you're there 24/7, you are not awake 24/7. We can have aides and other kinds of support layered in, just like Pete does with that building independence waiver.
Lucy, this is Sherry talking about, and I'd like to correct a little bit. Pete lives mostly on his own in his own apartment. And his friend Chris is his companion that lives there as part of the choice voucher. And Chris has his job and things that he does. So Pete does not have 24/7. He has maybe when Chris comes home, if Chris comes home, support from Chris. But then Bernard comes in from another, he provides companion services. So Pete does not have full-time care.
Sherry and Pete, thank you very, very much for the clarification. And another good point there about how we've got someone who chose a roommate. And as someone who lives with other people, we all have our own gifts and talents, right? And if you're choosing a roommate, whether or not that roommate has waiver services or is a formal aid, we would ideally like to see that everyone's sharing their gifts and strengths with everybody and helping out where they can, which can be a huge benefit of the kind of setup that Pete has, where he's got a friend that provides all kinds of natural friend benefits and peer mentoring benefits that we have. Can anybody tell us a little bit about the staff who work with you? Do you like them? We won't tell you if you say, we won't tell anyone if you say no. And then how did you choose them? Who are these people who are coming to help you? Lisa, yeah.
I think she's muted.
Oh, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I can't.
Okay, I have Austina. She's my staff. She's my she's my primary counselor. She helps me with things, and so other staff support too I have. Michelle is one of them. Stephanie's the program manager. Elise is the assistant manager. Chris, Brian, got them all. Got them all. Gil, he's our overnight staff from Sunday through Wednesday. And Chris, what on the weekends. So they're very wonderful people.
That's a great review. And Lisa, how did you find this staff? Did you choose them or did someone choose them for you?
They were. They employed them.
Yeah. Someone employed them for you. Did some matchmaking for you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Pete or Juan, you want to talk a little bit about the staff who helps you, how you got to know them or choose them?
One says, yes, I like my attendants. My parents helped find them through friends and care.com. I approved of them when they were introduced to me.
That's another great example. And I know lots of families where someone in the family is so good at navigating those care.com ads or those other job postings, and they do the initial screening. And then the person with a disability comes in and throws the hammer down and says, this is who I want and this is who I don't. And thanks so much for keeping me out of all the extra interviews, right? That's a great example of someone really being able to help control their services and getting support to do so. How about you, Pete?
Bernard.
Is hard.
What does Bernard do?
Help me do my launch in full clothes and exercise.
Those seem like important things to get done. And how did you meet Bernard?
Service community. We hired help. I can't remember.
This is his mom, Sherry, and he got help from he's being served by Sunrise.
Okay. So there we can have an agency, right, who does it. So that's the difference, right? Juan talked about his support team helps him particularly select people, right? The firing, the hiring, the training, and Pete has an agency to help. And it sounds like Lisa does too sometimes. So there's two different ways to get services through all the waivers. Now, Pete, you answered some of this question. I'll put it actually right back in your court if you're willing to talk to us about other things staff help you do. I heard exercise and laundry, which I could also use help with if Bernard has some free time.
I'm not going to help you. Nice try.
Anything else that anybody ever helps you out with?
The grocery store.
Working at the grocery store or going to the grocery store?
Grocery store.
Okay.
And you're learning to cook?
Yes.
And sometimes he takes you to doctor's appointments?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Then all the caregivers need raises.
Oh,
Okay. Juan and Lisa, any things that you can share about other kinds of things that staff help you do? It can be every day or just sometimes. Lisa, yeah, did I see your hand up?
yeah.
Go
Every
ahead.
day they also, our staff especially are helpful because fortunately we didn't go like, because the bus problem. I was gonna say I was gonna fight for our services, like for the delegates, and our staff needs raises, like raises, because they work really hard for me, for us, for me, with me.
They sure do. And it's an important job and a hard job. And Lisa makes a great point about advocacy and how we always need people advocating with us to make sure we end the waiting list for waivers and that we've got good pay rates for our attendance and the services we need. Lisa, 100%. Did you have something you wanted to add, Lisa?
And Lucy Beadle is the best advocacy person at the Arc of Northern Virginia.
I'll pay you later for that comment, Lisa. Thank you very, very much. And Juan, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share about any kinds of things staff help you do?
The attendants keep me occupied during the day. They show me how to prepare lunches. I can now make sandwiches independently. They coordinate daily walks and go with me and my friends, making sure that I am safe on the street. Do you want to read the next?
They need to accompany my activities such as book clubs, monthly dinners with my friends.
He said they read to me and accompany me to my activities such as book clubs and monthly dinners with my friends.
That sounds fabulous.
Yeah. He has a very, very active, lifestyle.
That's excellent. Okay, so the next question you can answer if it's a yes, but you don't have to answer if it's a no. Is there any technology in your house like remote monitoring or a phone or sensors or anything? Those kinds of devices that help you be independent and successful?
Did you skip Pete on that question? On the
Oh, no, Pete
previous
did
one?
talk about the great things his waiver staff
Oh, I'm
helps him
sorry.
do.
Okay.
That's okay. Lisa, yeah.
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. Do you have any kinds of technologies in your house? Any things that allow somebody to check on you, like FaceTime or a medication reminder that beeps and tells you to take your pills, or any other kinds of things like that that help you be independent and successful?
I use a tablet, a phone, play games, and use, sorry, and well, I can't pronounce that word. Messages my friends.
That's true, right? So great tools for you for communication and a great way to.
And I
to
also use a cell phone.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anybody else want to chime in on that?
Juan says, I have safe in-home equipment to help monitor my comings and goings. A safe in-home representative also calls me every morning to check on me. I have a cell phone for phone calls and playing word games. I also started using Empower Me to help me with my daily reminders. I have iPads to help me learn to type independently. to communicate, as I am non-speaking and type on the keyboard to communicate.
So certainly showing more tech savviness than probably most of us here in the room, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about communication software to help us with daily living, communication software to help us communicate, software to help us with daily living, to get things done and learn new skills, and software to help make sure that if something goes wrong, someone knows. We've got people to reach out to at all times. And so this is what I'll say is a big shift in independent living for people with disabilities in the last 10 or 15 years, where it really used to be, if you're going to be home alone, you need to be like 100% independent and able to make an emergency call or wait for staff. And now that we have the ability to push a button and see a staff person we know talk to us and help us walk through a difficult time instead of waiting for them to answer the phone and drive to us, right? Like, we have amazing new options and supports for people that are really enabling cool independence. And Empower Me and Safe and Home that Juan mentioned are great Medicaid waiver providers who can help work with you on those technologies.
Pete says that he wants to answer.
Please, Pete, I'm sorry.
Safe and Home too. They call me at in the morning, at night, and make sure that I get ready for work and take my medicine.
That's awesome. So checking in with someone remotely to make sure we're up, we're in bed on time, we've got what we need, those kinds of things.
He has a, what's your alert call button called?
Geocom.
He has a geocom that he can push to talk or let people know something's happened in the community. And then just today, he downloaded the ARCS technology called Waiver. And he's going to try that out to walk him through an independent living skill. He, of course, uses a cell phone. He's attached to a cell phone and worries about the battery life of his cell phone.
Which is something many of us worry about. Pete, is there something you do to help remind you to charge the phone? Or do you always carry a charger with you? How do you deal with that?
Sometimes I just carry a charger with me, or sometimes I just charge it at night.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Those technologies only work if they have battery or Wi-Fi or whatever they need, right? Okay. So you three really were asked to join this panel because you are waiver experts. You have used a ton of different services and have really good advice. What would you tell other people who are waiting for a waiver? We heard from you all. Most of you waited some time before you could get a waiver. And what advice would you give to someone else who's waiting?
Be right back, Lucy.
Okay, Lisa.
Do you want to start? Tell me when you want to start and I'll turn on the mic.
Me.
Go ahead.
You have to be patient and keep harassing them like I do. He calls them every 5 minutes to harass them if they don't know waiver yet.
Good advocacy there, right? And that's calling the Community Services Board. Like we talked about, they're the folks who help manage that waiver waiting list. So if they don't know how urgently you need a waiver, they won't know to get you one urgently.
I also use a cell phone too, Lucy.
Yes. And Lisa, do you have any advice for anybody who's still waiting for a DD waiver who doesn't have one yet?
Yes, I do. Oh, yeah. I'm coming, Lucy.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, I do, Lucy. Yes, I do.
We'd love to hear it.
Ordered. No. I lost. Be patient, be kind, and wait for your turn.
Okay. And Juan, did you have any advice for folks still waiting on their waiver?
Having the waiver has much improved my life. It has provided attendance to help me with daily living skills, to keep me safe, It has given me housing so I can live independently, to have a place to call my own. It has helped me find jobs and provided support for me at work. It has given me a richer life full of daily activities. It has connected me with many friends. I am part of a caring community, which I never thought I would have.
That's awesome. You're like the poster child for waiver users. That's the best answer I think I've ever heard. Okay, so one more question we had sent our panelists, and that's, what would you tell someone if they have a waiver, but they're still struggling? They're somehow not able to get quite what they need. And sometimes that's, we can't find the right staff or we can't find the right home. And what would you tell them? Lisa, I saw your hand there.
I would tell them to be kind and to try to express their needs and feelings in a better way. And if it still doesn't work, to seek other help, like your case managers or your work supervisors or your group home staff. I mean, your your caretakers. Sorry about the group home.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone you've got working with you, to ask them for help. Pete or Juan, any other thoughts?
Okay, one says they should sign up for ourstompingground.org. It is a network of people with disabilities, with their caring parents and family members. It is building the network wider and wider for more people to get to know each other and help each other. My disability specialist from Arlington County is also very helpful. She cares and wants me to do well. If I present a problem to her, she will help me solve it. I would also tell them to reach out to friends, family, religious communities, and their own communities. The waiver can help improve their lives.
That's fantastic. Yes, we are never alone. And I love that plug for Our Stomping Ground, which is a fantastic resource as folks are looking toward more independent living, and are looking for, by which I just mean living away from mom and dad. That's all I mean by independent living. It could be with all kinds of supports day and night, but just an amazing way to get connected, get community, get a true feeling of inclusion and belonging. And Arlington is such a great place to live for those options. Pete, did you have any thoughts on what you would share with a waiver user who's struggling some?
Keep on trying to bother them. If you don't talk, they don't know if you need a waiver. Then you have to be with your parents forever.
And that should prod us all out the door, right? We don't want to live with our parents forever. We're willing to take a chance.
Who?
Oh, Lisa, did you have something to add?
Yeah. Ma'am, I mean, I just want to tell, on behalf of the group, thank you very much, Donna Buckley, for coming on. And she's the best helper.
Here. Okay, Sherry, those are the questions we'd sent our panelists. Should I turn the microphone back over you to walk us through questions and answers?
Sure, and I'm just going to leave the camera on and not go back to the power. Well, actually, I'll do that. And then I wanted to share a few resources from the ARC at the end. So yes, let's go ahead, LaVoice.
I just wanted to highlight a few things before we jump into the Q&A. One about the building independence waiver, and you may want to elaborate on your experience with getting the building independence waiver. You do not need to be priority 1 to get the building independence waiver. And like Lucy said, there is not a wait list. It still does depend on the availability of waivers for building independence, but there typically are waivers that are available. So Sherry, if you don't mind, your son was on the wait list, and looking at what his needs were at the time, we determined that we would actually proceed with the building independence waiver. And we also discussed that if his needs were to change over time across his lifespan, we could look at adding him to what's called the reserve waiver wait list. So someone in one of those lower tier waivers that might have a building independence, and later across the lifespan, their needs may change and they need a family and individual supports waiver, or they need a community living waiver. There is a process in DBHDS, Developmental Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, for which someone can be added to the reserve waiver wait list for a higher tier waiver. That's, again, it's driven by what their needs are at the time. So really evaluate and consider, because it is a lot easier to get a building independence waiver, particularly if you're not a priority one, because to get the family individual support and the community living, you need to be a priority one. You can be a priority 2 or a priority 3 for the building independence waiver. And then the second thing that I just wanted to clarify a little bit is the Medicaid eligibility is not determined based on the parents' income or the family's income. So for where waiver is concerned, so I don't want you to be, just to keep in mind that you might think that you don't meet eligibility for Medicaid. Individuals that have the Medicaid waiver are found eligible under what's called Medicaid long-term care, and that is determined based on their income at the time that they get a waiver. And so that is also for children. So we support a number of children that have a DD Medicaid waiver. And again, the eligibility goes according to the child, and then looking at the long-term Medicaid. So it's not, when you get the waiver, your eligibility is tied to long-term care, and that is independent of your age at the time of getting the waiver. So yeah, just wanted to clarify those two things.
Thank you, LaVoice. That's very important. And speaking as a parent to some of the parents who may be tuning into this for the first time, the Medicaid waiver is in constant flux. Sometimes there are slots, sometimes there are not slots. And what happened to us is that they changed. It used to be you could wait forever. Well, you could wait until you're older, and then when you're ready for your child to go into a group home, you would probably rise eventually to the top of the waiting list. With the new waivers, things changed, and there is now more a priority and a cliff until a person reaches age 26. Unfortunately, when we were ready for Pete to go into some sort of living arrangement, he had just turned 27. So we were looking at waiting forever for Pete to get out of our house. And Pete did not want to live with us anymore. So as he said, unless you want your child to live with your parent forever, you have to really keep on top of things and rely on folks like Lucy and LaVoice to walk you through how to use this. And personally, I would like to see a lot more people just going and trying out the building independence waiver if they want to live on their own. Folks have done some shout outs to our stomping ground who are helping open up new properties with rent subsidies throughout the area, but many in Arlington. And I think Juan talked about book club, Pete's in book club. They like to go to dinner club. Lisa's in that group. So it's a nice way providing free services for folks. And I think they've done presentations, but go to ourstompingground.org, which Josue has put in the chat. So at that, I'm going to see if there are any questions. Go ahead and type your questions in. And there was one question that I believe was answered by Lucia and Donna, and it comes from Doris. And that had to do with I wanted to know if there's occupational group therapy for children 12 and up programs, or for parents with disabilities I could connect with for kids with autism to help get together for socialization skills. Lucy, you're aware of a lot of the services and supports in the community, and I'm not sure whether how the waiver might support this. I also know from Donna Bedway that there was some volunteer occupational therapists coming around also. So Donna, you can go ahead and unmute if you want. And Lucy, go ahead and talk about occupational therapy and the Medicaid waiver.
Lucy, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Then I'll give a super short answer just to say one of the great benefits of getting a Medicaid waiver is that it comes with Medicaid. That's why there are those financial eligibility pieces. And so even though someone may not usually qualify for Medicaid, it entitles them to all the regular Medicaid health benefits. And we often see people who need things like OT, PT, speech, behavior supports who can get very little of those through their private insurance, be able to access a lot more of those through Medicaid. Doris, if you want to go, I think Sherry has my email, or it was on the screen too, or send me a message anytime. I'm happy to send you a list of folks we know who do a lot of pediatric OT in the area. And sometimes it's a matter of, like you're getting on a couple of waiting lists and matching up service hours and those kinds of things, or other kinds of social skill groups. I'm happy to send along too. I don't have any like amazing secret answers. I'm not keeping anything from anybody on the rest here. A lot of it is, what it's like being a parent, right? You make all the calls, you run it down. But I'll turn it over to Donna.
We do have a really exciting opportunity right now at our stomping ground. We have an amazing partnership with George Washington University. So we have an art therapist and we've got occupational therapists, and we're doing a lot of programming this winter with them. And it is just an amazing opportunity. We're going to have these open labs where there are going to be opportunities where we have the staff support there. So please shoot us an email. And also for families with younger children, this DART opportunity that's been going on in the county for a while, we've partnered with them, but that'll be at Yorktown High School 2 to 3 on Saturday. They're going to go every other week virtual. And this happens to be an in-person one this Saturday, but it's free. Just, sign up. So they expect you. There'll be a room full of bright, smiling high school kids who are really excited about usually a big group of our friends with autism and other developmental disabilities. And it's just a great free opportunity to do a little fine motor and it's like a free social group. And it lasts like 6 weeks and we're on week 2. So I would encourage families to check that out. But please check out our calendar for all of that. And thank you. And great work. You guys are panelists. This was amazing. Sherry, LaVoice, Lucy, thank you for your leadership. This was amazing. Thanks.
You're amazing, Donna.
Yes, we love Donna. So are there any other questions that you want to put in the chat for our panelists or our experts, Lucy and LaVoice? Okay, and then I'm going to just go ahead and share. I'll come back to questions, but I'm going to go ahead and share a few resources that we got from the ARC of Northern Virginia. Also, I'm sending out a newsletter. It's not even a newsletter. It's just an email to members of the Developmental Disabilities Committee and the mailing list. So if you'd like to be put on that mailing list, go ahead and just put your email in the chat and I will find it afterwards and put you on my list. So at that, I'm going to share some resources from the ARC. Lucy, while I'm doing this and figuring this all out, can you please also talk a little bit about some waiver services that are in the lurch with the new General Assembly and let people know how they need to get involved with that?
I would love to. So every year, the reason there's a waiting list for waivers is because the way our state has written the contract to provide them, it's a state and federal government partnership. And the way we wrote that contract says we're allowed to have a waiting list. So each year we're sort of beholden to state government to fund new waivers for people who are on that waiting list. And right now the waiting list for the whole state of Virginia is about 14,000 people waiting for DD waivers to give you a little bit of a perspective. So huge waiting list. And all of those folks are divided into priorities.
Where's your texting? I can text a question.
Let's see. Yeah, Lisa, if you hover around the screen, there should be a little bubble that looks like a conversation bubble and you can text in. or chat in, I guess is more appropriate. So as Sherry was saying, this is a great time to advocate, to talk about why we need more waivers. So on our legislative agenda this year, we're tackling that in a couple of different ways. One is making sure the waivers that have been put in the budget stay in the budget and get funded, which seems like common sense. Otherwise, making sure that we are looking at people who are on priorities 2 and 3 of that waiting list. Remember, we talked about people who are doing okay-ish, at least, and likely to wait longer, and getting them what's called core services. So that would be Medicaid, a case manager, a few hours of weekly support, some respite. It's not going to be a big bundle of services, but enough both to help people be connected to the system. You've got a person to help you navigate all that there is out there, to help us plan for the future, and to give families a little bit of a lifeline. We know the huge difference that just some of those hours of care a week can make. And for perspective, that was funded in the Senate's budget, but not the House's. So if you can imagine, now they've got to go behind closed doors and kind of negotiate that out. And then we're also advocating for people who do have waivers to make sure that we are offering a full array of well-funded services, because it certainly is no good to offer people waivers and tell them to wait for them, and then them to find that the waiver doesn't actually do what they need it to do. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to our most recent action alert, where people can type in their address and it'll automatically send emails to your legislators to tell them how important this issue is. And always, you're also welcome to email me if you'd like to speak or be more involved.
Thank you, Lucy. Can you hear me now?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Lisa, you can stay on or you can hang up. It's up to you.
Hang up.
Okay, so just for more information, and this comes from the ARC in Northern Virginia workshops on Monday. Lucy's going to do something on the Medicaid waiver basics and using your waiver for fun and recreation. Next Wednesday, so twice in 1 week, there's something called Transition Lunch and Learn that the ARC in Northern Virginia does on a regular basis. And this next session will be on the waiver and developmental disability services. These Transition Lunch and Learns are twice monthly small group sessions, an opportunity to create a plan for the future. So it's just a nice way of slowly but surely finding out about these complicated services that are available to adults once they leave school. There are also a number of waiver resources on the ARC. Lisa, if you can put the links that are on this slide, but there's some frequently asked questions in a long and short version. There's something on understanding how to manage your personal care hours, the benefits of the Medicaid waiver, and then as Lucy said, there are links to that, whatever VIDE stands for, assessment, that she highly encourages people to go through with your person with a disability before you do it with your CSP case manager. And Lucy alluded to this, but I just want to say something about the VIDEs and the assessments, is that it can be pretty tough for a person with a disability to listen to all the things that they are not able to do. And yet if you say, oh yeah, he can make a sandwich, is he going to eat a sandwich for the rest of his life, or does he have to learn how to do other things in order to care for himself? So it's difficult, and it's very different than what you do in special education, which is talk about what someone does well and build on those. So it's just something that I hope people consider, but also consider respecting the person with a disability. And then just a little bit more from us. Everyone's welcome to join the Developmental Disabilities Committee. We meet the second Tuesday of the month between 4 and 6 o'clock. And every other month, we're going to have a listen and learn event instead of a regular meeting. The upcoming tentative dates and topics for these would be on April 7th, employment service options, including employment in Arlington. And on June 6th, it will be some day service options. If you'd like to be added to the Developmental Disabilities Committee email list, you can add your email to the chat or email me at sherryt@ecnv.org. At that, I'll stop sharing my screen, and if someone can help me with if there are any other questions, and if not, we will close this little listen and learn that we tried out.
Sherry, if I may clarify, the committee meets the first Tuesday of every month.
Oh, I'm sorry, LaVoice. Thank you. And I'll correct that on the slides that will go out to everybody after this meeting. I'm not quite sure. I believe that the Parent Resource Center will share this with folks who signed up. LaVoice, you will be producing this in YouTube, so there'll be a link to that and the slides, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for attending. Please tell your friends about this and more. And Emma, do you have something? Okay.
No, sorry. We were just going to say thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if there's any new message. Dora said, thank you guys, great meeting, and please keep coming to these. So long.